Welcome to Sacred Harmony, where depth meets dialogue. Today, we are diving into a conversation many men quietly crave but rarely voice: how to blend the practical and the spiritual without losing either. With us is Jon Symes, a man who spent 2 decades helping others untangle the hidden stories that shape masculinity, identity, and success. This one's not about being better, it's about being real. Welcome to the show, John. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Anya. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
hmm So, John, what first made you realize that so many men are silently struggling beneath the surface of doing everything right?
The first thing that taught me that is my own journey through life and the way in which I was born into a series of stories that shape how I used to think about being a man. And over time, I've realized that those stories are incomplete. Those deny the true reality of who I am, who each of us are. And I've been questing ever since to find out those stories, to understand them, to understand where they came from, and to learn to disengage from them. And when we disengage from them, we can choose new stories. We can choose stories that empower and uplift us. So all of my work flows out of my own journey, my own quest for wholeness and freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when that realization hit, did it shift how you saw your own journey as a man?
Absolutely. I had been guilty of assuming that the world worked around the preferences I had as a man. The world, as you probably know, is set up to advantage men over women. And I had taken advantage of that. I had lived inside of that with all of the consequences that come with that. The way I was, uh, let's see, the way I was prioritizing my own thoughts, my own needs over the needs of other people, and the way I was stuck inside a story in which I was the main character, and realizing that that wasn't a way in which I could really be true to myself. You talked about being real before. To be real requires me to step out of those old stories and to find new stories that are more fulfilling for me and in greater service of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. Because what you're describing isn't weakness, it's awareness. And I think so many listeners will recognize that in themselves.
Yes. Um, we're taught to pathologize any difficulties we have and to label ourselves as somehow broken or weak. And what what I fall back on is a deep belief that each of us are born whole, and when we can act from that wholeness, we have access to all of the human qualities that life has gifted us with. We're gifted with generosity and compassion and love and creativity and a zest for life, courage, patience, perseverance. Those are all present in us. And it's largely the stories that we carry that keep us from accessing that wholeness. And so I talk about being whole and free. And that is the process of recognizing and honoring that wholeness within each of us, and then working to free ourselves so we can access that wholeness, we can activate that wholeness, we can act from that wholeness in everything that we do. It's a lofty goal. It's a direction to travel in more than a destination, but that's what I'm committed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And you talk about reconnecting with purpose and emotional clarity without blowing up your life. So, how does a man actually begin that without fear or guilt?
Gosh, I mean, a starting point is for us to realize that we are in the grip of stories that many of which are unconscious to us. So the stories that we learn on our parents' knee, perhaps, or through the messages that reach us through the culture, have infiltrated in a way that they're actually, in some sense, running the show when we're not placing our awareness on it. And so the first step, I think, is to acknowledge that there are stories, and for men, those might be relatively simple stories. You know, we were taught to be stoic and unemotional, and so many of us guard our emotions. We don't share. We don't create emotional intimacy with people we love. And the story that a man is unfeeling and unmovable is a very pervasive story, and 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 yet we are feeling beings in the same way as women are, as everybody is. And so if we can even recognize that first story, and allow ourselves to begin to access how we feel and share how we feel with other people, then that's a tremendous first step. It opens up a whole dimension of being that we have as men, which is culturally being deemed inappropriate, but is actually authentic to who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And is there a moment where structure becomes a shield instead of support?
Yes. Structure can be a structure can be a cage, if we approach it in the wrong way. I My wife and I often talk about the picture of a trellis and a rose, and you know, we have a rose growing here that grows up a trellis, and both the rose and the trellis are important to the full flowering of the rose. So the structure needs to be able to provide a backing that allows the rose to grow upward towards the light and to express itself in its beautiful flowering. But if we approach structure um, as a fixed thing, it actually becomes a box. It becomes a cage. And if we cage a rose rather than trellis it, we're preventing its full expression. So structure is important, but it can become, as you say, it can become limiting to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Like turning stability into growth rather than armor. Like that balance feels like a new definition of strength.
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, we have, and I speak about men because I know men uh, so well, um, and we put a tremendous amount of energy into armoring ourselves, preventing the world reaching us, preventing us from sharing with the world, and in some sense, an armor that prevents us from really knowing ourselves. And all of the energy that gets locked up in armoring, in protecting ourselves, is caging our full expression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So, you have worked with men from vastly different backgrounds, corporate leaders to spiritual seekers. What's the most common thread that binds their unspoken struggles?
What a great question. The most powerful thread is, I think in some sense, the most dangerous story that we subscribe to is that we are separate individual beings. And so much energy and so much of our cultural way of thinking has us look at ourselves as individuals, individuals with wants and needs, and the culture wants us to recognize ourselves in that way, to act in that way. But actually, we are all connected in a huge cosmic dance, which is difficult to comprehend, difficult to even to know. But the knowing that we are actually all expressions, we're all, if we continue to use the analogy, we're all separate blooms on a rose bush, and no one bloom is more important than another, and none of them can be in their full beauty without the others. And so the story that we're separate is perhaps the most damaging of all.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. And do you think the stories they carry about masculinity are inherited or self created?
You got beautiful questions. There is so much. There is so much of the um, weight of previous generations coming into us. So I'm born into a line of men who have struggled, who have worked hard, who have tried to provide, who have tried to do the right thing, but have also succumbed to the temptation to put their own needs ahead of the needs of others, and have played into the cultural norms that we create around what it is to be a good, strong man. And so much of the way each of us is operating is brought to us through our lineage. And some of the some of what comes through the lineage is wonderful and empowering, and some of it is entirely limiting. And so the inherited aspect of how we be is super important. But the moment that we have choices in our own lives, and so when we can shine the light of awareness on ourselves, when we can reflect, when we can be honest with ourselves, there are choices that we make in this life, in this moment, which mean whatever has come to us through our DNA or our bloodline uh, can be overcome. We can see it. We can break with the patterns of the past. We can break the cycles that keep us small and separate. And the opportunity for freedom, the opportunity for growth is right here, right now, regardless of how you came into the world and the stories that shaped you in your earlier years. We all exist in a moment of opportunity if we can bring ourselves to see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating how much of what defines us isn't chosen, yet it like shapes every choice we make.
Yes, it does, and often in unconscious ways. And what we're trying to do is, and what I'm trying to help men to do is to make the invisible, the unconscious, visible so that we can take choice about it. Because ultimately, that is the greatest gift we've been given as human beings is the free will to make decisions, to take choices, to set direction. And so it's a precious act to be able to exert our free will.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. So, how do you personally blend the practical and the spiritual in your own life?
Well, the practical, it's very easy to be consumed by the practical, or at least I find it very easy to be consumed by the practical and the matters of here and now. And so I think what I endeavor to do is to align my actions with my deeper sense of purpose. And it's quite an easy sentence to say, to align our actions with purpose, but it isn't necessarily an easy thing to do, to be able to find a sense of purpose in today's confusing world is itself difficult. And then to align our actions with it when there are so many other temptations to use our time and energy in ways that are more self-serving, perhaps, than the larger sense of purpose that we have. That's in itself a challenge. And I think that's when we can bring in the spiritual dimension, because when we sit in enough time and space and remember that we are a small wave on an infinitely large ocean, when we know ourselves to be part of a much larger and incomprehensible mystery, then it allows us to put down certainly in my case, it allows me to put down some of my own wants and needs and my own patterns and preferences and see how my energy can be used in the service of life. I love that phrase, that direction that we get when we say the words "in service of life." And so much of what we do is we do in the space of taking life for granted, assuming it's there to support us, being successful with our own ambitions. But in service of life, asks a larger question of us. It says, can we look at our own actions, our own beliefs, our own thoughts, and see how they are helping the flourishing of life in all its forms, all other human forms, all the non-human forms? Can we really be in service of life? If we look at the history of humanity, we'll see that the gross impact of our actions right now seems to put us in opposition to the force of life. We're degrading the planet that feeds us, that houses us. We're in conflict with each other. We're categorizing some people as good and some as bad. And in that way, we're limiting the full expression of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. So, when life feels too practical, what pulls you back into the spiritual and vice versa?
Mm. Well, there are several ways um, I know to reliably come back into connection with the all that is greater than I am, and one of them is to be in the great outdoors. In some sense, I'm a mountain man, and I take off for the mountains at least once a year on my own. I try and find the solitude that comes in high places, and up at the tree line in the mountains that are near me, it's possible to see the miracle of life up close and personal. How a tiny tree can grow from a crack in the rock, how fish can survive in a mountain pond that will ice over every winter, and how there's a much larger, more beautiful harmony, coordinating, organizing the massively diverse expressions of life around us. So if I spend a couple of days in that environment, I'm brought back into my awe of of life, my gratitude for being gifted this life, and brought into an authentic desire to reciprocate all that we receive inside of this life and pay it back somehow in the service of life, in the service of other people, and by being ourselves the fullest expression of who we can be. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that dance between the grounded and the transcendent feels like the true art of being human.
Yes. Yeah. And isn't that what we're all trying to learn? How to be human, how to be present to the divinity within us, and the stories that we carry that keep us small. How can we how can we balance that in an authentic way? How can we know ourselves for the great gifts that we bring and recognize our own fallibility and guard against the ways that that might hurt people if it's uncontrolled?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, if you could offer one truth for men who feel lost in their own story right now, what would it be?
Well, I love to help men to begin to interrogate the stories that are controlling our lives, and there are some resources on my website that are available there. One of them is the reset map. It's called the midlife reset, and in that, what I'm inviting men to do is to really see where they feel that they're blocked at the moment, but also to find what's flowing and find where life is actually flowing through them. And if we can get in touch with that current that is flowing where life is actually working through us, it might be in small ways. It might be the way we love our children. It might be the gift of helping a friend. It might be the way we can lift up somebody else's life for a moment. If we can find places where that energy will flow through us in service of life and then amplify those currents of energy, then we're beginning to gain a freedom over the ways in which we would otherwise behaving. So I think that's a great place to start, and I invite anybody listening to go to my website. Not this isn't only for men; it's for any questing human, and to go to the website and go to the page of free resources, and please help yourself to everything that's there. It's designed to support people in the journey of becoming free. Narrative liberation is the process that is a name I give to the process. Narrative liberation is a way of freeing ourselves and coming back to the wholeness that we really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a grounded invitation. Something any man can act on, like without waiting for a crisis to wake him up.
Yes, and that's the trap that so many of us men fall into is, and me included, is we wait until crisis hits before we take action. And I I I I know the value of getting ahead of the crisis, and that's my journey is to learn to stay ahead of those moments of crisis by being in congruence with life. And so I commend anybody to begin the process or deepen their own process of self-reflection, self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So, what a conversation. Not about fixing men, but freeing them. John, thank you for helping us see that wholeness isn't perfection, it's permission. And to our listeners, maybe the next time you feel off track, don't ask what's wrong with me. Ask what story am I living? And until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep walking that sacred balance between the real and the remarkable.